Steel is one of the most critical materials in any project, so to say any disruption or change in supply chain is profound would be an understatement. All of us are familiar with the current tariffs, and you're likely also familiar with the uncertainty that they've caused. But how does this impact construction? In this episode of OCS Talks, we look into what tariffs mean and the impact they've had on steel in the construction industry.
Welcome to OCS Talks, your source for all things related to Ontario's unionized ICI construction sector.
I'm Brian Barron, CEO of the Ontario Construction Secretariat, and joining me today is Gord Rados, Executive Director of the Ontario Structural Steel Fabricators Association. Gord, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Brian. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join you today.
So, Gord, you and I met a year or two ago at one of your association events. I was brought in. I was speaking on a health and safety matter. But I know that some of our listeners, so some of our members here at the OCS are familiar with your association. But for those of you who aren't, can you give me a brief intro into your association and really kind of what their mandate is? So what's the goal that you're trying to sort of get across in the association?
Happy to explain. OSFA first stands for the Ontario Structural Steel Fabricators Association. We have 49 member companies, which employ about 20,000 steelworkers and support staff across Ontario. Our members include affiliate members who are direct suppliers that we work with in our industry. In terms of these members, we have a steel mill, steel joist and metal decking manufacturers, material service centers, galvanizers, fasteners, rolling and bending, and other services. Also the CWB, the Canadian Welding Bureau, is a member of ours, and transportation providers who also help supply our steel fabricator members with many products and services we need to get the jobs delivered and done. So we have two types of membership: steel fabricators, and second, our affiliate supplier members. That makes up our not-for-profit trade association. And with great people in our steel industry and great companies, we have a network to discuss and advance our common goals. Our mandate is to promote the use of structural steel in the construction industry. We want to become safer, to learn from each other, support a cost-effective approach in performing our trade, find solutions to industry challenges we all face. This specifically means the work of fabricating and installing structural steel. So I hope that explains it.
It does, thanks. So so it's really kind of, in my impression when we originally met was, you're ultimately taking sort of the raw product, you're turning it into something that eventually ends up sort of in a construction project, industrial facility, something along those lines. It's really kind of looking at all those pieces. So you've really got the manufacturing side, and then it goes directly to kind of that construction, the person who's actually installing, or the group that's installing that. So Gord, obviously we're all concerned about what's happened since Trump took office, but let's talk about what that means for the construction industry. We've seen projects paused and unfortunately even canceled due to Trump's policies and the arbitrary tariffs that are placed against us. But I think it's fair to say that the steel industry has taken really more than its fair share of that focus. So currently we've got about 50%, we have a 50% tariff with the US, and then an additional 25% retaliatory tariff here in Canada. I'm curious as to what that means for steel fabricators here. Like, what is the actual impact of those tariffs?
Well, the impact of the tariffs to our members is this. If you have US work and you need US steel, you're going to have to pay the price. And the price ultimately is a lot more money. So without buying, we have other sources, and we're buying mainly from EU countries, and avoiding, if they're non-FTA countries, we're avoiding any tariffs at all. And just to put that in perspective for you and your listeners, if we say today we know we have a value of $1,650 for a beam, US price, we're getting that for between $400 and $800 less buying from the EU.
Wow!
So that makes it work for us. It's quite a big difference, and
that shocking when you think about sort of shipping costs and everything else as well. Like I think what a lot of people are thinking is like, hey, listen, that was a very convenient relationship we had with the States, where you're literally just trucking it across the border, sort of thing. That's a different deal dealing with the EU. So like it's pretty considerable when we take a look at the tariff making that much of an impact, that it offsets those costs to the point where it's that much cheaper to go to the EU.
And then you think how much in reality Americans are now paying for their US steel. And that's part of the issue. And that goes right down to the consumer. And we have options We're using those options. And then, of course, people are going to say, well, why is the steel price then affecting me, Gord? With tariffs, you're not paying the tariff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what's happening in the real world is that steel is sold in the US dollar currency and it's set to a theoretical US price per ton. So even though we're not paying the tariff, the price for steel globally has gone up because of Trump's announcement. And so we're all paying more, even though we're paying less than they are. It's still a cost. And when we look at it, I've had ice cream shop owners and people that make leather goods or servers in restaurants, and they say, "Oh, steel doesn't affect me." And I say, "Well, look, every single thing is made with steel. That's why Trump, in the first place, wanted to set a tariff on something that everybody uses, and steel, and protecting his domestic steel market. And so with that, everything is going up. And you know, when you look at rents, when we look at the cost of a building, when we actually do the math on a building, just this 25% tariff has brought in a realized 30% real cost to Canada today. That 30% cost is 20% for steel, because steel is the largest one item on a construction site. And so you take 30% of 20, you're at 7% that has gone up. Now look at that impact on rents, on how much it costs for rent, for future property taxes, and so forth and so on. And ultimately, it's why a hot dog or a hamburger is going to cost more, even though it's not made from steel. It's just because it's in a building and it's being made there. So this is our reality.
Yeah, it's kind of the collateral damage behind it, right? Like we're sort of looking at, one of the questions I do want to ask you about is sort of that the final cost of the owner and contract terms and stuff like that. But when we look at sort of that collateral damage, that further down the line, you've got even things like shadow pricing, right? Like there's other pricing that's going up as a result of it because of its relationship to steel. But then you've got the operating costs, shipping costs, just general overhead that's there. And I like the fact that you brought up rent as well. I mean, that if the cost of building is going up, that's going to have an impact on our rent as well, right? Rent's going to go up. So that overhead goes up, and that does get passed on to that, to that end consumer as well.
Yeah.
So it does have a pretty profound effect right across the board.
And it already did from 2018. It increased rents with tariffs then. And everybody's looking for an excuse when they can get a higher price for something. And this is what seems to happen in the world. It's just the way business is done, around the world, not just in Canada.
So I want to jump back for a quick second here, because one of the things that I know is a primary concern to a lot of the construction companies out there, as well as project owners, because a lot of project owners are saying, hey, listen, we're not, there's two issues. One is we don't know what construction costs anymore. It's, so the price I give you today, if I don't start that project for, a few months, 6-8 months, something like that, the price is likely to go up considerably, kind of thing. But then the other piece is do I wait this out? Do I play the waiting game, wait until sort of Trump is gone and hopefully these tariffs kind of go away, and it suddenly become, it makes sense to manufacture things here again. But when we're looking at sort of those contract terms, so because we're speaking to construction companies, part of this is we guarantee those prices for a period of time. So when I give you kind of that quote and say, this is what my part of the project is going to cost, how likely is it that I can provide you something reliable kind of thing that isn't going to change significantly because of the uncertainty that's happening out there?
I mean, I wish I had a better answer than what I'm about to say. And it's just been factored 3 weeks ago. We just got a new initiative from the Prime Minister's office. Prime Minister Carney has brought in TRQs, which are rate quotas for steel. And basically, they're set up in quarters. And if there's a certain tonnage across Canada that we can use, and if your steel is on a ship being shipped to you here for your job, and Canada goes over that quarterly quota, you now have a 50% tariff from Canada for that imported steel. So we need to put in, and our members are putting in clauses to protect themselves, tariff escalation clauses, and even as much as with prices, it's also delivery. And of course, we're on track, on time, trying to get the job done to a proper schedule, and it's very difficult to do under all of these circumstances. Because now what's going to happen is if you got this steel and you budgeted, and we're on lump sum prices here, contracts. So I've got my steel coming across the ocean and it's almost here. The government announces the quota for the quarter is done. Now what do we do? Well, what in theory, and this is what's probably going to happen, is maybe that steel is going to have to sit there in Montreal on the dock for the next month until the next quarter kicks in, and then they can actually take the material and have it delivered to the yard. So these are all these time constraints and pricing issues that everybody, ourselves included, and the owners are dealing with. So it's no wonder that work has gotten canceled, and it's hard to want to build something right now. Sadly, I say that, and I understand the issues and how hard it is for them too.
I want to come back to what we can do, sort of thing, maybe is kind of the last part of this podcast, because I think there's a number of things that we can do around these things, because that's clearly a problem. And I think that translates into a project owner's uncertainty as to whether or not they want to move forward with something. The more educated they become around this, the more that they probably start to get cold feet around the types of projects that they're going to be taking on, because it is a bit of an unknown. But before we get there, one of the things that's sort of struck me since all of this has started and since I began at or started this role at the OCS is speaking with a number of people and politicians. And I came in just as Trump was elected in. So I think he was in on January 20th. I started this job in February 4th. So it was so this has kind of been my reality in this role. But you get a number of people and politicians, basically all of them asking, well, why can't we just source everything in Canada? We have both large steel producers as well as manufacturers and fabricators. Why haven't we just cut the US out of the market? And I think in some cases we've found some alternate trading partners and that sort of stuff, but it's tricky. I don't think it's as simple as just saying, hey, let's go to the EU, let's go to Asia, let's go, wherever we have to go to get steel. Those trade relationships, it takes time to establish that relationship and figure out what the supply chain looks like around that sort of thing. So what would you tell, the regular people, the project owners, the politicians, that sort of stuff? Why can't we just source everything in Canada?
You'd have to first convince, here's how we're talking specifically about making a steel beam mill in Canada, because that's what we don't make. We make everything else. So it's just that. And part of that is that a beam by nature is a much larger product, and it has a lot more sizes. There's probably 200, 250 different sizes of beams that you'd have to make in this mill. And then when you think about it, everything is automated today. It's got to be a huge mill with a line going 2 kilometers long. You've got, in theory, 50 office staff, maybe another 25 on the computers working the melt and pour lines and going down this runway. And then you probably another 200 people at the end who are just unloading, stacking, and shipping it out. So it's a huge cost. You've only got about 300 people, and it's dirty. You have the issue of is Canada going to, is Canada going to agree in building another mill? Yes, we're getting better with environmental standards and reducing our emissions. But ultimately, let's face it, you need heat to make steel, and steel is CO2, and CO2 is polluting. So, when I usually say it like this, politicians usually stop. And it's always the elephant in the room, because then they realize, oh, okay, are we really going to subsidize and help a company come into Canada for 300 jobs to build a product that's also oversupplied, in theory, around the world at any one time? It's a tough market, the steel beam business. And that's why Europeans are willing to ship it to us, and other parts of the world for that matter, and why it is cheaper for us than US.
Well, you don't get much more clear an answer than that. Basically, if you've got no supply issue, there's major sort of impediments to bringing something like that to Canada. It does clearly outline the fact that no, we can't just do everything in Canada. Although we've got manufacturers,
we can't,
all that other stuff. It's just not realistic. So we do have to work on those trade relationships, and we do have to kind of work our way through that. So that makes total sense to me.
If I can add, Brian, just one thing to that. When they have to look also is in over history, U.S. mills have had a hard time with steel beams because of the global oversupply. So for Canadians to convince a steel mill, you got to give them money. It's not that many jobs. It's polluting. And so it really, in theory, looks better to just buy it from the sources around the world where we can buy it because we are so green with our initiative. You know, that's to summarize it all.
Well, it is interesting too. I was talking to a fabricator over at a dinner 2 weeks ago, and asking, how has this impacted? And they said actually pretty significantly, because they have mills in both Canada facilities in both Canada and the U.S. And he said, well, we've set ourselves up where they're specialty facilities, right? You've got ones that make certain things up here in Canada, ones that make certain things down in the United States. So they're still having to turn around. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch to change kind of what you make so that you can supply the Canadian market. There's still this interdependence between, across the border that we have to deal with. So he said it's really not as simple as dealing with, or just saying, hey, we've got everything we need here in Canada, because we just don't. Now, in terms of sort of recommendation from you, so like it's trying to kind of look at, I see like a few different issues here. I mean, one of them is sort of that trade relationship side of it, and how do we kind of work with the government to make sure that these quotas and that sort of stuff are reasonable, so that does give us the flexibility and the adaptability to build things here in Canada. But it's also looking at how do project owners, how do construction companies, fabricators, anybody along those lines insulate themselves from the variability of pricing that we're seeing out there as a result of kind of this uncertainty. So like, how do we move towards a more local supply chain, or something that works just a little bit better? Do you have any recommendations around that?
I do. I mean, these challenges are ongoing and they change monthly. But what I can tell you from the past, and what I believe, my own personal opinion, what's happening out there, is owners are willing to pay for all the material in advance. So most of it is Canadian. The steel beams are offshore. He gets everything. He orders it. This is millions of dollars for every project we're talking about. He pays for all of it. It's his property that comes to our members' yards and plants, and then they can manufacture, fabricate, and ship it to the job site as needed. This avoids those potential future either TRQs quarterly or any tariff that may be announced, because that's the other issue here. We may get other tariffs in theory. So that's the way I think owners should approach this, and everyone in construction. And our members, as big as many of them are big, they can't finance millions of dollars for every project. They have like 10 projects going on at the same time, and the interest cost today and credit is harder to source. We need help from owners, and owners are totally willing to pay for it because they realize what's happening, and it makes the most sense. And that's how I see it playing out again in this realm right now.
Well, I guess my next question for you is sort of just an off the cuff question here, but it's, when you look at your membership, when you're sitting around your table talking to sort of your membership as your association, what is their number one complaint? What is kind of that impact on them? Like if there's something that you could really kind of drive towards as this is the message we need to send home, what is it?
They're concerned with business. And and as I said earlier, with the uncertainty, they're getting less business, and with less business, there's less projects to bid. And they've seen projects where it would be 4 or 5 bidders typically are now 15 to 25. Not only that, 10% of those bids are from provinces, outside provinces, Alberta or Quebec, and Quebec. That's another concern for our members. They do have an unfair advantage. They are heavily subsidized. They pay much less in hydro, in property taxes. And this is all fact checked from many different government statistics. So they're coming in here, they're bidding the work. When you have a 7 to 12% advantage over us, and our members are working at 5% probably right now, I'm only assuming, you can see how quickly we lose work to Quebec coming in here. And the other issue with Quebec is they come in with their own union, Quebec union workers, work open shop and finish the work. And then all that money leaves and goes back to Quebec. And that hurts because ultimately we're going to see that showing up in our communities. And, less money to support a bake sale or to sponsor a hockey team, or even for the poor workers out there that have already been laid off. Do you even have the money to send your child to play hockey or any sport? So it's that community issue, and our members, they have these workers are a family, and it's just been devastating, and it's ongoing, and we just hope that it can change soon, because that's the other thing. And of course, our government is promoting interprovincial trade, and I get that, and it's good overall, but we also have to realize that we need to take care of ourselves here in Ontario. Yes, it's a big part of the pie, and other people want it, but we also have to take care of ourselves to be able to pay the taxes and everything else we need, and employ the good people we have in our province to do all the work, so that we can, the government can tax us and get the revenue. That's in a happy scenario, that's how it should all work.
It's interesting. So, some of the work that we've been doing at the OCS and kind of the, party line that I kind of keep harping on with some of this stuff is looking at that responsible procurement. And, I think a lot of people turn around and say, oh, this is good when there's lots of competition, it means prices go down and that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, it's a bit of a short-sighted way of looking at things, because what ends up happening is exactly like what you describe is you take out some of the larger responsible players, the one that actually have some corporate morals and that kind of stuff, where it's, they are giving back to the community, that money stays within their local economy and that sort of stuff. And you lose out on that. So when all the money that you're paying out for these projects is going to other places, and I'm certainly not going to pick on Quebec or anywhere else. I mean, it's wherever it goes, we lose that opportunity to reinvest it within that local community. You don't get any of the benefits that you would see within that community, which I think people really need to start shifting their mind towards, because it's, we've gotten very used to looking at this low bid mentality kind of thing. And it's done with virtually every public project right now. There's not a lot from a pre-qualification perspective that really looks at what that longer term impact is. You get these, these companies that parachute in, they do their work, and then they're gone again, right? And we never see them, and we don't get any of that benefit, which I think we need to do some work in trying to shift people's mindset a little bit around that, because it is a big impact.
It sure is.
Do you have any final thoughts on this? Anything else? Any other message you want to get out to our listeners?
Tariffs ultimately get political all the time. And I hate even bringing up Quebec or the U.S., but this has been brought on to us here in Ontario. And I think what I'd like to say is we should be hopeful, and we will have to change. And of course, people don't like to change, and we'll have to change for the better, because we're going to be working more internally and overseas with other countries. And we're a great nation. We've done a lot of good in the world. It's unfair what's happening, but we're just trying to deal with it the best way we can. And just recently we were voted the most loved country in the world. We're number one. And when we put our minds to things here in Ontario and in Canada, there's a lot of good that's going to be coming forward. And we'll have to look at all of these issues as I raised earlier, and we will persevere, and we shall overcome. That's really what I wanted to leave everybody with, and we will do the best we can. And even though it's tough, but we will get through this. We've done it before, and we'll do it again.
I couldn't agree with you more. And with that, Gord, I'd like to thank you and the Ontario Structural Steel Fabricators Association for your time today on OCS Talks. For more information on today's podcast and resources from the Ontario Secretariat, visit our website at iciconstruction.com and follow us on social media. Thank you.
Ontario Construction Secretariat. Knowledge to build on. Visit iciconstruction.com to learn more.